My name is Lydia. I am the executive director at Wild Goose Creative. We're super excited to be here with the one and only Felicia DeRosa to talk about all things art and COVID and social justice and TTalks and so many awesome things. I am currently sitting in our new temporary location at the Bridge Gallery in 400 West Rich. So for those of you who don't know what Wild Goose Creative is, we are a nonprofit community arts organization, and our mission is to build a creative community, and we provide space and resources to local artists, in addition to hosting professional development workshops and really providing affordable space for artists to, do their creative thing. So we were previously located for a decade in Clintonville on Summit Street. Due to the effects of COVID, we had initially last year planned 2 spaces because we were turning creatives away constantly. We didn't have enough space. We had over 320 events a year. But because of the fact that, we haven't had any events in person, we needed to figure out how do we best serve our creative mission. And, right now 2 spaces just doesn't make sense for us. So we permanently moved to Franklinton, and that's where we are now. And then we are going to be moving into our second location, or our permanent location, at 188 McDowell, which is exciting. So we're in here until that gets done. But anyway, I'm really excited to be here with Felicia. Hi, Felicia.
Hello.
How are you today?
I'm good. Welcome to the Inner Sanctum, my studio.
So where are you? Where's your studio?
So I'm located at Millworks in one of the many studio spaces.
That's exciting. I've actually never been to Millworks, but I really want to go.
I love it. It's very blue collar. There's depending on the kind of artist that you are, depends on the kind of environment you like. And I like to shut myself in a hole where I can create undisturbed. I have no windows. I'm the only one in the space. I do lose track of time. I've been here sometimes 16, 18, 35 hours and forget to eat.
Wow. I mean that means that you're in the what is it called? The flow state though.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. But that's what I love about it is that I can just come in here and just work undisturbed, which is what I need. It helps me keep my focus because I do get distracted otherwise.
Well, we have worked with Felicia closely for over a year now with one of our newest programs called TTalks, and we'll get a little bit into that later. But Felicia, why don't you introduce yourself? Like, what's your deal? How did you get started as an artist?
Okay, so like the whole thing.
The whole thing.
Well, so I started being a creator probably when I was a 9-year-old. I had an uncle that was really amazing at making art. He was someone that was just naturally gifted. He never really took any professional direction and not really a lot of classes. But I'd say like, oh, draw me a tiger. And he'd pull out a piece of paper and it was like this beautiful, gorgeous, realistic, oh my gosh, he drew that tiger. And I would always ask him every time I saw him, draw me this, draw me that. Finally, he got irritated because when I was little, he was probably like 22, at the time, but not much older. And he's like, here's a sketchbook, here's a pencil, you draw it, and just left the room. And then I'm stuck here with this pad of paper and a pencil. And I thought, let me draw a tiger. And it didn't look right. I erased it, tried drawing it again, it was wrong, and I crumpled it up, I threw it away. Wash, rinse, repeat. And finally, one day I drew the tiger. It was exactly what was in my head. I was like, aha, I did it. And I was 24, graduating college.
That's a good one. I love that.
So I have devoted my entire life to being an artist. And what's really cool was I was 12 and I got discovered by a gallery. I was living in Florida.
You said you were 12?
I was 12.
What?
And I was doing these very surrealistic ink washes and ink studies. And they gave me a show, and I have been showing consistently ever since.
Wait, do you have a example of what you did when you were 12? anywhere? If you don't, it's fine, but that's crazy.
I mean, I do, but it's in a portfolio off camera, and I could go and look and get it, but it might take 10 minutes. But yeah, it was, I was obsessed with Salvador Dali, and I read a thing that he kept, and this is probably half BS and half truth, but he kept a golden goblet. He would be in a chair in front of a blank canvas. He'd have a golden goblet, and he would hold something in his, like a pencil in his hand. And when he fell asleep and the pencil hit the goblet, it would wake him up, and whatever he was dreaming, he would paint. So I did something like that. I kept a sketchbook under my pillow with a pencil, and I'd wake up, and if I had an interesting dream, I'd try and sketch it. And some of the good ones that I had, I would develop into, I was really into like pen and ink techniques. I was doing pen studies. So I did these really surrealistic drawings, and it was just what I was into, but I got my foot in the door. So I started participating in group shows and annual solo shows right out of the bat. And then that's how I was able to get a few scholarships to go to art school. I went to art school in San Francisco, the Academy of Art University. So I lived there. I lived about 18 years in San Francisco collectively. Like, I was very little originally from Long Island, and we moved to California for a short period of time. It was a little too expensive for my mom and I, so we moved to Florida where it was really cheap. And at the time, they had really good public education. So did high school and then came back to California then at that point. And the Academy of Art was at the time like the best art school that you could go to for what I wanted to learn, which was a lot of very strict formalist technique. I have a philosophy as a visual artist that I wouldn't call myself specifically a formalist, and I wouldn't specifically call myself a conceptual artist. I believe that successful art is in the middle, right? You want to have good high concepts, but you want to have that technique sturdy enough to support the concept. And I think when you have that nice mix of the two, those are the artists that we come to study, right? So that's where I was at there. And I got into, it's called the lowbrow. So you have highbrow, which is high concept people. You have lowbrow, which are mostly illustrators that go into the gallery scene, and they're mostly formalist, right? And there was a run of things called pop surrealism. Mark Ryden is a good example. Shepard Fairey. In that group, you had people that were street artists that were making themselves legitimized by coming off the street and into galleries. And I ran with that crowd for a really long time. So I showed all over Northern California and Southern California. And for a while, I had work in upwards of 18 shows a year, group shows, and then a couple of solo shows here and there. So I spent on average 90 hours a week making art, and probably an additional 15 to 20 going around promoting. I kept that up from 2003 until about 2010. Around 2006, there was an economic crash where I was. As an artist, there's tiers. So there's the emerging artist where, like, you got a show at a coffee shop, right? You're selling your work for $50, right? I think a lot of us start there. I did, you get to a middle of the road place where, like, that same painting you did for $50 now sells for 500 or maybe 1,000, right? And part of it is your reputation and your notoriety and your visibility in the scene. And then part of it is what you're saying and how you're saying it, right? So it's a investment of time, and you keep climbing up those tiers. That higher echelon are artists that make work, they sell it for $100,000, but the people that collect that work mostly want to collect it, wrap it in bubble wrap, and store it until you die. Then they resell it for a profit. It's an investment. I'm not against that, but my end goal as a visual artist is to connect. So if you connect to one of my paintings, then by proxy, you're connecting to me and I'm connecting to you, which was something that I was always looking for as that little art kid, that came up in the scene, was how do I connect to people, because I was a lonely kid, right? So that's sort of my big deal. when the economy took a tank in 2005-ish, 2006-ish, it took my demographic, that middle area, out. The high-end people were still investing in art because they could. The low-end people were still buying art because it was just a little bit of money. So my demographic, I kind of kind of lost that a bit. So I recalibrated, moved to Chicago. I was doing art fairs, and I was working with an art education group in the South Side in Hyde Park called the Little Black Pearl. And that's when I started really learning how to teach and be an educator and work with at-risk kids. And by at-risk, I mean kids that are in depressed areas for one reason or another. Maybe they've got a rough home life. Maybe they're struggling with poverty, or maybe there's violence and drugs in their area. That's the kind of group that I'm talking about. I was one of those kids, so it was an opportunity for me to reach out to kids in similar situations that I was in and say, hey, you know, there's another option here. You can do this art stuff, and you know, it could be a way out, or it could be something to help you process anything, and you know, just be a facilitator, right, for some positive thinking and creativity. And I was doing a lot of public art there, a lot of murals, and then ended up getting picked up by a gallery in Belgium and moved out to Europe for 5 months to promote that and do work there and travel around, and then came to Columbus, Ohio, got involved with Gallery 83, went to grad school, and here I am.
That's crazy. I had no idea like that you had started it so young. How did the gallery see your work when you were 12?
They kept calling me a child prodigy because my skill level was comparable to the adults I was showing with.
Yeah.
Where I was, because I was only 12, you know, you only have so much life experience, and a lot of art deepens with the more life experience you can put into it.
Right.
So most of my work was about technique and social commentary, and I was able to kind of run with the sharks a bit and then learn from them.
So what mediums do you work with mostly?
So my main focus is acrylic paint. I'm a painter by preference. Like I said, going to that art school I went to for my undergrad, I wanted to become proficient in any kind of medium I could get my hands on, so that the work would be able to tell me what it needs to be. I am a conduit of the muse, if I could be a little pretentious there. Sometimes a concept tells me it needs to be written down, like a short story or poem or something like that, and I do some writing as a way to sort of work out some ideas before I can turn it into something else. Sometimes it's a portrait study, or it's a comic piece. Sometimes it's a sculptural piece. Sometimes it's performance. Sometimes it's an installation. The work tells me what it needs, and I want to be able to facilitate the work the best and most articulate way that I can. But paint is always my first love. I've done digital painting, and that's fine, but my paintings, and we were talking about this off camera before getting started. There's a painting back here that's hard to see. I started doing some tonal studies, which is, it's a gray board, but and I matched the paint, making it one step darker and one step lighter, and doing a study in gray, which was a nice departure, because early in my career it was very about butting up complementary schemes and having this electric kind of vibe. And it works amazing in person because I make my own paint. So my red is my red. And if you have it printed out, you have the red your computer is capable of making.
Right.
If you see it on a screen, you have the red that is possible with your particular monitor. But my red only exists because I made it up. It's a specific setup of red. My blues are my blues, my orange are my orange. So I start with my pigments, and I work with my mediums, and I make the paint that I want, and I twist it into an interpretation of what red means to me. It's more emotional, or what yellow orange means to me, or what black means to me. And typically my cool colors are very flat and chalky matte, and my warm colors are satiny and glossy and oftentimes have a pearlescent quality to them. So in real life, you also, not only do you have these two colors butting up against each other, fighting for intensity on your actual eye experience, but they push and pull because the shinier, more glossy stuff comes forward and the matte stuff becomes back. So it becomes an illusion of dimension.
That's really, really cool. Wow.
So I get into messing with people's eyes. So I'm a big color theorist. There's the color theory of temperature, the color theory of physical scientific interaction, the color theory of historical significance, and then also that theory of, how can I be ironic? I can present a very pleasant, joyful image, but use angry, sad colors and get a completely different image than if I did it with happy, fun colors. So that kind of approach.
So really kind of creating a tension there within the colors. So tell us about what you're working on behind you. Is this part of your new series?
So the black and white work is part of it, yes.
Okay.
There's a bird-looking creature here that was, I had a rewind. So I'm transgender and I transitioned in 2016. Up until then, the work that I was doing was an exploration in control and subterfuge because I was hiding my identity and denying myself because I was afraid of it. So my work had a reflection of that. It was very controlled. There was no visible sign of my hand creating the work. I hid all my brushwork. Because of my control with paint and my ability to do crisp lines and stuff, I got dubbed as a master painter, which is a little bit of a bit of honor that I hold dear to me because I have been painting for 30 something years. Mm-hmm. Hopefully I would get good at it. And so all of my early work, and if people go to my website, they'll be able to see these paintings, was all about technique and control, but also there's a lot of studies of the female form that prior to transition, I explained to people that I was exploring character, but in truth, I was exploring my own femininity in a covert kind of way. Mm-hmm. So these were images of strong women, creative women that represented an aspect of how I wanted to see myself, or how I thought I wanted to see myself at least. So when I transitioned, I took a little bit of a break to focus on that. And then when I came out of transition, or I got to a place where I could get back into the studio to be more accurate, this is the painting that I did. It was the first attempt at doing a painting. It came out in grays. It's you can see all the brushwork. It's much more expressive. And my work has become more introspective and more freely emotive and more authentic, honestly. So much less forced control and more a sense of free expression, which I'm happy with. It was meant to adjust. And I've been using this I had a few of these up in my solo show. And then this creature here, I call it a psychopomp. I made 7 of them. They are based on the size and anatomy of ravens. Ravens are really that big, it turns out. They're gigantic. But I modeled them after a kind of turkey vulture. But they're built out of analog surveillance equipment. And the idea was this sense of always being observed and always being picked apart. So I wanted something that was a carrion eater. I wanted something that was threatening. I wanted something that made you uncomfortable. When I turn this guy on, there's a little red light that blips. Everyone thinks they're being filmed or monitored. They're not. It's a dummy. But everyone thinks that way. So the interaction that people have with these sculptures is half the art. Mm-hmm. But the feathers are the remnants of a project I did pre-transition. I took scraps of my early work, reconditioned them and built them into new work as a transition to where I'm headed. So it was meaningful that way. The understructure of this is built out of old panels of how I used to paint work that I deconstructed.
Wow.
And reconstructed into it. So there was this sense of, and it also came out of a place in my head of where I felt a little bit like I was constantly having to hide and that everyone was judging me or that everyone was picking me apart. So I wanted to express it into a three-dimensional thing to sort of pass that sensation on to other people, turn it around.
Interesting. So how long has social justice been a part of your work? And has it always been kind of a theme throughout, even though your mediums and your themes have changed, or is it just been recently? And also, how has 2020 influenced the work that you've been doing?
Okay, so the big one. So I've been involved with social justice probably since near the end of high school, um, where I would go and I would support. Mostly, I support marginalized voices, um, and marginalized voices is a big running theme in a lot of my work. People that are oftentimes overlooked, subject matter that is oftentimes overlooked or not given a second thought. I put them on center stage, giving them an opportunity. I have always been in some way a facilitator, and when I was up through high school, my work was me centric. Um, I was hiding who I was. I unfortunately grew up around a lot of abuse and a lot of othering. I came up in part of a part of an immigrant community. My family is Sicilian Roma, um, mostly hiding as Italian Americans, which was easier socially, but there was all that pressure to don't let people find out who you are. And within the Italian American community, there's a lot of um, colorist attitudes. If you're not full-blooded Italian, you're a half-breed. If you are Sicilian and not actually Italian, you're less than. So there was a lot of that kind of attitude I had to grow up around. And just in the area that I lived in, there was a lot of discrimination, and a lot of us in my friend group were dealing with it. Like if my friend was Asian American, he was dealing with some discrimination in the area, and my friends that were African American, my friends that were Native American, because there was actually quite a lot of diversity, but we were all dealing with a lot of different forms of discrimination or othering that we were trying to deal with. It was the sign of the times. I'm older, so it was not as developed framework of time in regards to how to deal with people of ethnic diversity. It's much better now. Obviously, there's still a long way to go, as we can see by the current environment that we find ourselves in. As far as we've come, we still have a long way to go. But it is better by comparison than it was 30 years ago, 50 years ago, 80 years ago, right? And a lot of us activists will say that it's about those incremental developments, one step forward, two step back. Everyone does their best to try and push society forward, but that's the reality of it. So I did a lot of focusing on cultural things that were important to me, and sort of like me dealing with the abuse I had at home. No one listened to me as a kid. Maybe they thought I was being melodramatic, but my mother was a very good liar, so there's always that to deal with. So a lot of what I had to deal with was about that aspect of social justice. People, under 18 being actually taken seriously, actually being listened to. That was where my focus was. Once I was graduating high school and I went to college, San Francisco, I used to joke that, you had 4 seasons. You had fog, winter, construction, and protest season. And literally during protest season, which was springtime, you couldn't go anywhere without there being people that were raising awareness about something. And I tease it, but I love it. It was a welcomed crash course in understanding the world, my place in it, and how I can do what I can to try and make things better. And there's always a learning curve. You never just arrive one day and go, I know all there is to know about activism or being an advocate or doing social justice. As far as you come, you've still got this much more that you can go. And the point is to recognize it when you come across it and be willing to do better and keep marching forward and doing the good work, right? We learn as we go and try and do the best and educate along the way. And so I got involved really big doing protest stuff in 92. That was around the time of Rodney King and everything that happened in LA, and then LA burned. And what's happening now is an interesting parallel, because it's a lot of what people are saying, the arguments we're having now, we were also having in 1992. And I was protesting in solidarity in Berkeley, in Northern California, where stuff was going on. Meanwhile, stuff was happening in LA. But it did not get the level of support and coverage that movement, the BLM movement, is getting currently. A lot of that has to do with the current generation just being much more proactive in awareness, but also with the advent of the internet. And I mean, this is why you've got people protesting and marching in solidarity all over the globe, not just all over the country, which is amazing. So for me, seeing the conversations that are starting to happen, seeing people actually listening, and hope, real policy change to the systemic issues that we have, is 30 years in the making at the minimum. And obviously for people that, this is their daily struggle, it goes back way further than that. Obviously the conversation has been going on arguably since before the Emancipation Proclamation, right? Like, this is a struggle that's been going on forever. But this particular fire, if you want to call it that, I've been participating in it for 30 years, trying to do my best to be support. So I've been, as an activist, as an ally, as an advocate, it's exciting to actually see that there are people listening and trying to make better. And obviously there's still a long way to go. And as an activist, I'm doing what I can to be a good support, to be a good ally, and to be a good facilitator. Because at the end of the day, and a good ally is someone that leverages their privilege, whatever that might be, to get into spaces to then basically yield the floor to whichever marginalized group you are advocating for at the time, so that they have an opportunity to say their piece, hopefully in safety, right? I hope that wasn't too rambling.
No, that's awesome. I was going to say, speaking of spaces, do you want to talk a little bit about TTalks? So TTalks is I think it is our newest program at Wild Goose. Started last year in August, right?
Yep, we just had our anniversary.
Yeah, and so, I mean, we haven't been having any TTalks in person since March, but we've been continuing to do them online. And you can follow the TTalks page and our page for more information. But yeah, so talk a little bit about TTalks. What is it? How did you come up with the idea? And what are your, visions for the future for this program?
Okay, well, with TTalks, it's another aspect of the activist stuff. These ideas of presenting people in a light where they can be seen if they've been invisible or other, giving them like facilitating a space for them. Since that is the way that I function in my community, as a facilitator and as a chance to give people a voice or give them a stage at the very least, right? Because so many people who are marginalized, for whatever reason they're marginalized, don't get heard, don't get seen, right? That's a big deal. And if we are heard and seen, then to try and control that dialogue to be positive and uplifting and not something that tears that group down. As a trans person, that's a very big deal for me, because there is a lot of negative spin about who trans people are and what our experiences are. And I had been working with, when I came out, I got involved with Trans Ohio, mostly doing volunteer work at first. I had, up until then, my biggest advocacy point was working with people in marginalized groups. So a lot of support for the POC community, and especially the Black community. because I have members of my own blood family that are different shades, either through marriage or direct descendant blood, because I'm Roma, and we come in like every shade, and sometimes within the same family. So there's a little bit of a personal investment in wanting to ensure the safety of members of my family, especially the younger members that I worry about all the time, because they're darker skinned, and I worry about their safety. I worry about them being blocked from having opportunities. And and of course working with kids, well, when I came out and I started doing work with Trans Ohio, I very quickly understood the rocky situation that trans people are in. And there's all these little nuances. If you are trans feminine and a trans feminine person of color, it's disproportionately more dangerous. But just trans people in general having to deal with so many negative stereotypes and bigotry and othering. You're dealing with stuff coming in from religious organizations that want to clobber people with an inaccurate point of view of their religious beliefs, because it's more socio-political than it is religious from where it's coming from, but they get the protection of saying I'm a religious group, and that's a whole different conversation. And then having to deal with, like, how does a trans person safely date? What if you want a romantic relationship? A lot of the people that have brutalized trans people are partners. Most of the time, it's partners or family members, and then next down the list are people that come up in perhaps during sex work. Those are the biggest offenders for violence against trans people. It's perpetrated and made worse by ignorance and poor information and misrepresentation in media. And that, again, is another big topic. So with my work that I was doing with Trans Ohio, we did Trans Day of Remembrance together. I've helped organize that the last 5 years, and each time trying to find ways to make it better, more hopeful, more uplifting, more intersectional, more inclusive as much as possible, And I realized that what I wanted to do was get our stories out there, because at the end of the day, I'm an educator. I was educating before I realized I wanted to be an educator. And then when I was in Ohio and I did my grad school work at CCAD, 2012 to 2014, part of that degree was being a college educator. So learning how to teach, taking what I already kind of learned on, trial by fire, and really refining it. And I believe wholeheartedly that with the right education, you can dismantle the ignorance that is the spark of intolerance, hate, and then violence. So get people while they're young, give them the right information, and create empathy. So I decided that the best way to do this was through story, because story is so powerful. I've been talking this whole time about my experiences living in San Francisco, my experiences learning how to be an ally, an activist, and an advocate, admitting there's still a long way to go for what I can do and how I can do it better, and just in general in society. And you're relating to that because it's similar work that you do. I could talk to you about experiences with dating. Anyone who's ever dated can empathize with me about how complicated it can be to date. So as a trans person, if I'm telling a story about being brave, and from me, it's like admitting a time I screwed up, or admitting a time when I felt discriminated against. Anyone who's felt like they screwed up, or anyone who's ever felt discriminated against, immediately can see themselves in what I'm saying and have empathy. As soon as that happens, I'm no longer a concept. I'm no longer a thing under the bed. I'm no longer, the butt of some kind of joke or some kind of weird villain or some kind of trope in a TV show or a movie. I'm an actual human being. And once you see me as a human being, like, you can disagree with me. You can decide not to associate with me, but you can't really hate something you understand and empathize with, or you see yourself in. And by doing that, you start dismantling the possibility of this person or a person flipping out and coming at me with a hatchet, which is what I'm trying to avoid, which is what I think most trans people are trying to avoid. So with that as my background, as my philosophy, I started this group at Wild Goose where people would come in and then I was having featured speakers. So people that get 10 or 15 minutes to, on a theme, tell an anecdotal story. It's not quite like a TED Talk where you're kind of doing a lecture, and it's not like you're doing a debate where you're reading from a thing. It's kind of like this. We're just having an informal conversation and I'm relaying an experience. And then we'd have an open mic element, and people would have the opportunity to sign in, jump up and do 5 minutes, unscripted, go for it. And then we have this component where we post it on a Facebook page and we post videos on a YouTube page, and it started becoming a community. The same people started coming and they started bringing allies and friends with them. And then we had like community hangout for the first half hour before we'd start, and community hangout the last half hour afterwards. So we would have people just getting to know each other. We had an individual that hadn't been out in public for a very long time. We were the first place they came out to be around people, and now they have a community. They made new friends. They're going out more often. They feel more empowered, more encouraged, and safer because they realize they're not alone. And I have gotten emails and contacts to the Facebook page of people who were struggling with their gender identity all by themselves in a bubble. They hadn't met anyone else who was transgender. They'd only read stuff online or through searches, but no actual community, but has connected through the stories that TTalks does and realize there are other people out there, and they've developed hope. They've developed the sense of I can still have a life. I'm not going to suddenly find myself dead or self-isolated and never be around people just because I wanted to live my truth. There's this something that we're trying to really build, and over the last year, that's what it's become. So now for our anniversary show, we did a little tutorial on how to tell the story. And for me, it was important because as a Roma, as that part of my cultural background, the oral storytelling tradition is huge. Almost everything I know about my family, almost everything I learned about who we were, wasn't anything I read. It was these really amazing stories, these kind of campfire stories, so to speak, that my family told me. And it's this beautiful tradition that I want to pass on in my community as an aspect of sharing myself, because honestly, Roma people in the United States are completely invisible. We have no real identity here. Outside the US, it's a whole different situation. But here, we either purposely hide. So if you're white passing like I am, you can hide as a white person, or you can hide as part of let's say you've got a lot of Irish in your blood, you can hide as an Irish person, or you can hide as an Italian American, wherever you feel like you blend and you have safety and community. It's very common to do that because when we came to this country, we were running away from persecution and violence and discrimination to try and have a chance at a better life, like a lot of people, that immigrated to the States. So I'm not hiding things anymore. I gave that up when I came out. I said, I'm going to be authentic across the board. I'm going to share my cultural identity. I'm going to share my ethnic identity. And I'm going to share my identity as a trans person with the hope that I can feel congruent, feel like a whole person, but also so that I can be the person that I needed when I was a kid and just deathly afraid of the world and them seeing me as I was because I didn't know what would happen.
And, so at Wild Goose Creative, storytelling is a huge part of our history and what we do at our organization. I think a lot of people think that we are just a gallery or is, related to visual art, but that's really only 10% of what we do. And so storytelling is such a huge piece of the programming that we offer to the community, like Speakeasy, which is Columbus's longest open mic storytelling event. We have Sassy Do Improv, comedy shows, and really just providing another level of support and education. So it's like you are telling a story, but we're helping you with that process. And helping you tell that story. So I think TTalks is such a great program, and we're really happy to have it at Wild Goose, and we're excited for the future. Hopefully we can do some like hybrid stuff. And yeah, we just love the program. How can people learn more about TTalks? And if there's somebody interested in reaching out to you about telling a story, how would they do that?
Okay, well, TTalks, at some point we're going to have its own website. I am trying to build my own little nonprofit, and TTalks will become an aspect of it eventually with everything going on in the virus. For right now, we exist online, and so the best way to get a hold of us is on our Facebook page. You look up trans storytelling or trans talks or TTalks, and we should pop up. You can also find it through my page, Felicia DeRosa. His picture of me, and I'm associated with that. It's also my art page is on. I have a Facebook art page as well under DeRosa Art. You can see that as well, and so they all kind of interlink. But if someone were to go to our TTalks page, they can also they could direct message us and say, I'd be interested in being a speaker. Please, by all means, I'm running through all of the people in my immediate community. I'm always looking for more speakers. And the good thing about doing Zoom stuff is I can get people speaking from different states, different cities who can't make the trip. And that's something I want to keep going. I actually like this aspect of it. So people can submit, and we always do a call, like, oh, August, we're doing our anniversary thing, and, tune in for our Zoom stuff. And these are our speakers. And if you want to do an open mic thing, you can reach out. Basically, I get people to record on their phone. They do like a 5-minute, whatever the monthly topic is, they can send that video to us and I will post it on the Facebook page. We have end goals of eventually publishing a book of some like the best of stories written down so people could actually read our experiences.
Awesome. Yeah.
And we've started a spin-off group called Transitions, which is for family, allies of, children of, parents of trans people, but not the trans people, because a real reality is when you're transgender, when you transition, so do the people in your lives, and they need to be able to have a safe space for them to be able to work through whatever they're working through without potentially triggering the trans person in their life that they're trying to ally to or be friends of, right?
Right.
So,
right. That's that, yeah. So
right. That's what's going on there.
Yeah, it's awesome. Definitely check TTalks out. So I just have a couple more questions that I'm personally curious about. What type of art do you find to be most challenging or most rewarding, or both?
Most challenging, most rewarding. Public art is probably the most challenging because if I'm doing a commission, if you say, Felicia, I want to commission you to do a portrait of my mom, I have an audience of one. As long as you like it, I'm successful, right? But when you're doing public art, you have to appeal to literally everyone somehow, right? So you have to be thinking in universal themes, and you have to be thinking about, well, you have to be up on your social norms, and depending on what you're trying to do, are you trying to get a rise out of people? Are you trying to be more decorative? Are you trying to tell a narrative or what? And so the challenge is, what do I want to say? What is the best way to say it? Who do I want to say it to? And then consider how many people are going to look at it. It's not super common for artists to consider their audience, but I've always been the artist that wanted to connect to my audience. So for me, it's a focal point. So and it's the most rewarding when I get to do a public art piece that is received well, because that's when I feel like I was able to tap way. That's all I want to do is contribute in a meaningful way in whatever I'm doing, especially as an artist, but as a facilitator, as an activist. I'm just trying to do my part to help make the world a little bit better than the way I found it, and along the way, I love meeting people and hearing their stories. Like I'm a glutton for stories. Anyone can tell me their story, and then I feel like we're connecting.
Well, you're a really good storyteller. It's easy to listen to you tell stories, that's for sure. So how would you describe the Columbus art scene? Like how is it different than San Francisco?
Actually, there's some parallels. When I was really deep in the scene in San Francisco, it was the 90s. Like I said, I'm older. I was in college from 1992 to 1997, and that time frame was an art renaissance that continued through some of the early 2000s. There was street art was huge. It was everywhere. It was making its way into the galleries. There were previously illustrators that were making a crossover into fine art. There were people being very experimental. There was the emergence of outsider art. It was awesome. There was so much brilliant work happening and some crap.
Of course, as always.
Brilliant stuff going out there. When I came to Columbus, I had no idea what to expect because Columbus is very self-contained. San Francisco exists on tourist dollars. It doesn't have an infrastructure without people visiting San Francisco and spending money. Recently, and by recently I mean the last decade, the internet 2.0 has taken over San Francisco, so their income is internet driven, and it's a different environment than when I was living there. But when I came to Columbus in 2010, the underground art scene, which once you find an in and you're in it, is amazing. The music here, there's so much great jazz. There's a great thread of punk and alternative music going on. The art here is a combination of high art influenced by New York and Chicago and like Pittsburgh, and a lot of outsider and lowbrow art influenced by a lot of illustrators and a lot of people just trying to express themselves here in Columbus. And then here I come from the West Coast with sort of a West Coast vibe, and I'm finding a lot of commonality. I'm finding there is this fervor, this need to be like, I have to identify myself. I have to express myself. And there is this rise of self-expression that I have been privileged to witness and be a part of. I especially saw it with my students at CCAD, where there was you're watching people figure themselves out. Who am I in this community? Who am I on the world stage? And how do I express it? And this constant state of flux, this evolution is gorgeous, and sometimes it's hard and sometimes it's painful. Like there's a lot going on where there's a lot of people trying to figure things out. So, we see a weird cancel culture happening that sometimes is helpful and sometimes is toxic. And you've got a lot of people self-segregating because they're trying to figure themselves out and trying to untangle, I guess, themselves. Hard. And again, from an observer standpoint, I'm not going to speak for anybody else, but I'm here for it. I'm excited to see it, and I'm excited for my part in it, and I'm excited to be someone that facilitates other people and giving them a platform if I'm able to, when I'm able to, and to be there in the background supporting people while they're doing what they have to do or what they feel compelled to do or what is necessary. But this evolution, this flux that Columbus has right now, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we have to fix. Yeah, there's a lot of brokenness. Yeah, there's a lot of scary, awful things, but there is also this undercurrent of willingness to change and love and creativity that I think at the end of the day is going to save this city.
And collaborate too. I feel like that's such a huge part of who we are as a city. And it's just like there's a Midwestern sensibility about us, that we can collaborate with each other. And really cool projects come out of that where you're combining music and art and comedy, and just like it's really incredible the stuff that happens here. And we can do that in this city. I mean, the fact that there's hundreds of artists living and working here because the cost of living is still relatively low too. So just figuring out how we can best support our artists, especially during COVID, is a challenge, but I know that we're up for it. Can't stop Columbus.
Yeah, it's super exciting. And I've been thrilled to be part of it. I've been trying to do my part to support the Black Lives Matter movement here in Columbus. Doing a lot of protests. I've done some of the artwork in support of it, which has been my honor. To have been asked to help with things, trying to make things better for. I say my community, but I mean like all the people I interact with in Columbus. When I say community, I mean the whole city that I'm a part of. I want to do my part to be a positive force and
Yeah.
be a member, and be someone that advocates for change and for growth. Um, it's hard to hit all the points all the time,
Of course.
and you're always going to run into folks that think you can do things better, or that you should have done things differently, or more aggressively, or less aggressively, and all you can do is listen and make adjustments and keep moving forward and trying to do the good work. And especially in the last year, have been trying to refocus that back into my visual art, instead of less actual, outside, um, I guess, I want to call like in the trenches, which I'm always happy to do. But as a visual artist, I also want to make sure that I'm also taking care of what my strengths are, right?
Sure, sure. So what's next for you, Felicia?
So I'm working on a body of work that is a conversation of and on male toxicity. I feel as a trans woman, I'm uniquely qualified to do this. Um, I didn't transition, like I said, until 2016. I'm 46. Just out of my age here. So for 4 decades, whether I liked it or not, I grew up in and was indoctrinated into male culture. I was trying to survive as a cisgendered heteronormative male, even though that is not who I am. I kept thinking that if I did, I would be able to not be othered, not be abused, not be bullied, and that I could not always feel afraid and scared all the time, right? I thought if I just play ball. So, for better or for worse, I am very well versed in that aspect of culture. Um, Once I transitioned and I was able to leave the pretense behind and be myself for real, I look at it now through a different lens, and I'm like, this is a conversation that needs to happen. And the art world is very much male centric. It's boys club, and that's unfortunate. It's harder for women to be taken seriously in the art world, and as a trans woman, I have the authority to talk about the male experience without getting shushed. When I've seen female artists try to tackle male toxicity, they get shut down pretty fast. Not always, but fairly often. Like, you don't know what it's like, but you're a woman and you don't know. And there's a lot of this like mansplaining and shushing, and it doesn't get heard. And men don't often make conversations about male toxicity because either they're not aware of it, or they don't have that objectivity because they're still in the male part of the community. Because I lived it and I got out of it, I can be objective. So I am taking my perspective and my experience of living in that and coming at it from a feminine point of view, to make a conversation. So it's going to be paintings mostly, some sculptural pieces, and some installation pieces. I've been developing different things. I'm not going to give a lot of it away because it's still in the planning stage, but I've been trying to be in communication with the Columbus Museum of Art to see if I can have a forum to present it. And I do have a good relationship with Wild Goose, and I do have a good relationship with 934 Gallery, and the Vanderelli Room. So I'm looking at trying to see what I can do in what space to kind of have this conversation go for a while, but it's probably going to be a year before that's ready to be launched.
That's exciting. I'm really excited for that. We definitely would love to talk about collaborating on a project like that. For sure. So yes. How can people get in touch with you and learn more about your art and all of that?
The best way for people to track me down and communicate with me about any art stuff is going to be obviously Facebook. If you look up DeRosa Arts, so it's my last name and the word art mashed together, or even DeRosa.arts. You can find me through my Facebook page, Felicia DeRosa, and I have links to my Facebook page there. So that's like something like what we're doing today. I posted there about it. You can find me on my Instagram page, which is Felicia DeRosa. And then I have a website, which is DeRosaArt.com. So DeRosaArt, done as one word.com. And I do have to update some new work there. I have a hard time photographing these great paintings. So when I figure that out, I'll be able to then update some new work, but it's fairly current, especially because I had a hiatus. And you can see the body of work that I've been doing all the way up to 2003, when I really started my website, to be honest.
Yeah. And you have a Patreon too, right?
Oh yeah, that's right. I just launched a Patreon. Duh. I have a Patreon that is also as DeRosa Arts. You can be a patron of my work for as little as $3, and that gets you a ghost hug. And then it goes, you can, I think, pay $10, and I'll just rant about things on video. The Patreon is to support my activity as an advocate, as an activist and ally, and then also to support my artwork. Unfortunately, when you do activism, or like I do a lot of public speaking, I don't get paid for any of it. It's all volunteer work because people don't want to pay. And when I suggest getting paid, they decide to not have me talk. So I say, okay, I'll do it anyway, despite the fact I'm not getting paid, because it's more important to have these conversations. And so I have to find a different way to try and get paid for it. So Patreon is a way for me to get paid to support me while I'm doing my speaking in front of churches, religious organizations, businesses, medical groups, schools, to support my efforts going out there to support the people I'm supporting. So when I'm out there supporting the POC community, the Black community, if I'm out supporting fellow Roma, if I'm out there supporting at-risk kids that are not being taken seriously or being paid attention to, or at risk because they're queer or trans, or they're in a depressed area and they're trying to escape violence or whatever, having some kind of financial income to help me help other people is what I'm looking for. And at the same time, being able to afford the materials I need for my projects to do more art, either publicly within the community or even just for myself in development. It's a way to kind of help facilitate that. My high level is $100, and every 3 months I send you a print, and that gives you access to everything. For $30, you get master's classes where I will, like a 4-part series, how to do a portrait, 4-part series, how to do sequential art, a 4-part series of how to make your own paint, whatever. That'd be people getting a class from me, and there'd be like, more than likely I'm gonna do once a month for the classes, but once every couple of weeks for a talk about art, probably once a week, people watching me make art.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really awesome. Well, it was such a pleasure talking to you today. I mean, I feel like I learned so much about you that I didn't know, which is awesome. And on that note, you can also support Wild Goose Creative for as little as $5 a month, which allows us to continue offering programs to the community like TTalks and providing a platform for marginalized voices. And you can find more about Wild Goose at wildgoosecreative.org. And then you can become a member or make a one-time donation at wildgoosecreative.org/support. So I just want to say thank you to Felicia. Thank you to Nicolette Cinemagraphics. And thank you to the Reese Brothers. This is the last series that Wild Goose is facilitating, but I think they're going to be doing more. So this is such a great platform, and thank you. So thanks, Felicia.
Thank you. Thank you for being in my studio and talking with me. And thank you to everybody who's watching this. Please support local art. Please support activist organizations, because there are a lot of them in Columbus and they all need help, especially now while we are all in the midst of change and hopefully positive reform. Yeah, be part of the community and help us out in any way that you can.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Thank you all.